Vishal, it's a huge spectrum of lesions and can be quite intimidating to the residents, as I understand. So this is the latest classification by WHO 2017 fourth edition, and look at the huge list here. And on one of my free days, I actually sat down and counted these lesions, and there were more than 55 lesions here. And so many of them look so similar. But histologically, management-wise, they are very different. So there could be cysts, there could be tumors, there could be tumor-like lesions, there could be benign lesions, there could be malignant tumors. So with such a lot of overlap, I'm here to make things a little simpler for you, and we shall see how we can approach a jaw lesion when we encounter one in our practice. So what is the role of a radiologist? We can have a very ambitious role of making a definitive diagnosis if the findings are very pathognomonic. But what we usually end up doing is characterizing the lesion and narrowing down the differential diagnosis to a relevant few. And also mention how aggressive the lesion looks like. Does it look aggressive? Does it look malignant? If it does not look that, if it looks like a benign lesion, whether it's a cystic lesion or it's a tumor. In addition to solving all these diagnostic problems, we also help in guiding the management of the patient by completely evaluating the extent of the lesion, how the lesion is involving the inferior canal, how is it present in relation to the adjacent teeth, what is the height of the inferior cortex which is preserved by the lesion, because if the patient is taken up for a marginal mandibulectomy, then you require at least 1 centimeter of inferior cortex to be preserved, otherwise that surgery will not be possible. So these are various questions that the concerned surgeon would put across to you, and you would have to solve all these management issues with them. So in intraoral and panoramic radiographs are the first initial modality to evaluate any jaw lesion, and CBCT is another technique which is increasingly being used by oral radiologists. Now, radiographs and CBCT is what is generally managed and seen by the oral radiologists, and that is what happens at our institute at least. Where do we come into picture? We come into picture when we do an MDCT or an MR for this patient. So MDCT is our workhorse. And how do we score over CBCT? Because we can administer contrast and evaluate for enhancement, evaluate soft tissues, which is not possible with a CBCT. In addition, MDCT can give us this beautiful panoramic reconstruction. So I'm sure you have faced these dilemmas while you're practicing, that when the patient comes to you, he forgets to get his OPG along with him. And the first thing that I want to look at once a jaw CT is completed is look at this panoramic reconstruction. There are specialized softwares which do it, which along the arch of the mandible, this reconstruction is done. And this gives me an OPG-like picture, giving me an overview of the entire lesion, its relationship to teeth, and the relationship to the inferior canal. We can obtain these beautiful volume rendered images and oblique reconstructions as well. MR is a complementary technique. It's a problem-solving technique. It scores over CT owing to its superior soft tissue contrast resolution. So to see a wall enhancement, to see any small enhancing component within the lesion, to see extension into the outside soft tissues, that is where MR scores over CT. Another feature here is the promising role of diffusion-weighted imaging in cases of certain lesions which may be atypical. So how does diffusion help us? We shall see it as we go along. So when you come across a jaw lesion, how do you start assessing the case? Before you start looking at the radiology of the lesion, look at the demographics. What is the age of the patient? What is the gender of the patients? These are features that help you narrow your differentials. Then start with the location of the lesion. Where in the jaw is the lesion located? Try and differentiate between an odontogenic versus a non-odontogenic lesion. Look at the density of the lesion, lucent, mixed, or radiodense. See if the lesion is cystic or solid. Look at any aggressive features if present, and I shall take you through this tour one by one. So beginning with odontogenic vis-a-vis a non-odontogenic lesion. How do you determine that? So a lesion which is located in relation to one tooth or a part of the tooth is likely to be an odontogenic lesion, and odontogenic lesions typically lie above the inferior alveolar canal, as we see here in this beautiful diagram as well as on this OPG. On the other hand, non-odontogenic lesions may be associated with multiple teeth or no teeth at all, and they usually lie below the inferior alveolar canal. Now, the problem here is it's a small bone and the lesions sometimes are quite large. So it may really not be possible for us to differentiate between an odontogenic lesion and a non-odontogenic lesion. But what I want you to remember here is that if the lesion is below the inferior alveolar canal, it is a non-odontogenic lesion, and also it will most likely be a benign lesion. Then look at the density. Is it a lucent lesion? Is it a mixed density lesion? Or is it a sclerotic lesion? And based on this density, different differential diagnosis can be proposed, and that's how I have actually divided my talk, and we shall see it as we proceed. How aggressive does the lesion look? For aggressiveness, look at the margins of the lesion, look at this adjacent cortex, look at the adjacent teeth. This is a well-defined lesion, a fairly well-defined lesion. The cortex is not disturbed, it is intact. This looks like a non-aggressive pathology. These lesions are more expansile, and owing to the expansion, there are areas of cortical breach. So it's an expansive cortical lysis owing to pressure. This, on the other hand, does not actually expand the bone, but still manages to destroy a lot of bone. So out of all these lesions, this is the most non-aggressive lesion, and this will be the most aggressive pathology. Look at the adjacent teeth. Now here is an example of a dentgerous cyst, a well-defined lesion in relationship to one tooth, and the adjacent tooth is preserved. There is some mild effect, there is some subtle displacement of this root, but we still do not see any erosion. So a non-aggressive pathology. Here, on the other hand, is an odontogenic keratocyst. What do we see here? We see a well-defined lesion. Yes, the margins are well-defined, but we see a lot of tooth displacement and root erosion. So certainly a more aggressive pathology. But still, this is a slow-growing lesion as compared to something like this. What is happening here? Now, these are more ill-defined lesions. There's a lot of soft tissue accompanying the lesion, favoring aggressive pathology. And what is happening to the teeth? Now, since this squamous cell cancer is a very rapidly growing tumor, unlike an odontogenic keratocyst or an ameloblastoma, which are slow-growing, although aggressive, but slow-growing tumors. So in case of an SCC, what happens is that it finds it somehow easier to erode into the bone rather than the teeth. The teeth are relatively preserved by the cementum, by the periodontal ligament. So all that acts as a relative protection, and the tumor somehow, in its fast pace, rapidly erodes the bone, giving rise to this floating tooth appearance. What we also need to determine is the cystic or the solid nature of a mass. So a non-contrast CT will not be able to do it for you. So do not shy away from administering contrast whenever you're evaluating jaw lesion. I've seen many places which just do a non-contrast CT, but that will not give us the entire picture, and that is where we score over oral radiologists. So do not let go of your contrast. Give contrast to see whether there's any solid enhancing component, which can be better seen on MR owing to its superior contrast tissue, superior soft tissue resolution. So it is not a cystic mass as it may appear on an NCCT, but a cystic and a solid mass. What is the density? Radiolucent, mixed density, or radiodense? This is how we divide. That's the general approach that I've followed here. And starting with the radiolucent lesions, which form the bulk of the lesions. Nearly 80% of the lesions that come to you for imaging will be actually radiolucent lesions. So I'll spend most of my time here. Radiolucent jaw lesions could be well-defined or ill-defined. And again, cystic, solid, odontogenic, non-odontogenic, there's a huge list. But what I would go through with you in these this 30 minutes that I have with you would be a select few common cases. So beginning with a radicular cyst, that's the most common cystic lesion in the jaw in relation to the apex of a non-vital tooth. The tooth has to be non-vital, be it secondary to caries, be it secondary to trauma. The tooth has to be non-vital, and there's a cystic lesion in relation to the apex. However, this is not what reaches you for the purpose of imaging. This is handled by the oral radiologist. This is handled at the level of the dental department, where they do an intraoral radiograph and look at the radicular cyst. But you may occasionally come across them as an incidental finding in your routine head and neck examinations, as was the case here. Now, here was a case of facial cellulitis, and that is what the resident also reported it as, a case of facial cellulitis. But what I want to point out here is that when you look at any case of facial cellulitis, especially around the region of the jaw, also look at the underlying bone, look at the underlying teeth. We see a lot of periapical lucencies, and here are a couple of lucencies with cortical breach contiguous with the adjacent soft tissue. So this was a case of periapical abscess leading to facial cellulitis, and you may be the first person to point it out. And this may actually not come from the dentistry department. This may come from a surgical or an ENT department. So you may be able to point out the correct cause of the problem. Here is another similar situation where you see sinusitis, especially unilateral maxillary sinusitis. When you see maxillary sinusitis, think always at the back of your mind, you should always have in mind that I have to rule out an odontogenic cause to it. So this was one such case again where you see a tooth root projecting into the sinus with the subtle cortical dehiscence as well. In fact, up to about 10% of cases of maxillary sinusitis, it is believed that they are odontogenic in origin, and you can make a huge impact on the management, because now here the patient requires endodontic treatment. The patient requires antimicrobial cover for the anaerobic flora, which will now be infecting from the oral cavity, infecting the sinus. So the antibiotic coverage would change, and endoscopic surgery may not be the first thing that the patient would need, but dental treatment and your broader spectrum antibiotics, and you can make a huge impact here. So remember that we are not looking for periapical cysts, radicular cysts, but generally what we see here is, what comes to radiology is the complication because of periapical abscesses, and then you are the person to point out to an odontogenic cause. Dentigerous cyst is a non-inflammatory odontogenic cyst, the most common cause of pericoronal lucency, impacted tooth within. Most common site is this third molar site, and this typically attaches at the cemento-enamel junction. The roots of the teeth are projecting out of the lesion, a well-defined cyst superior to the inferior alveolar canal. Cortex is generally preserved. Here was another case, a 27-year-old girl, a unilocular cyst, impacted tooth within. Looked like a dentigerous cyst, certainly, but what caught my attention was this minor tooth root erosion. Now, this can be present with large dentigerous cysts. Of course, it doesn't rule it out, but with a cyst of this size and this root erosion, really, it needs to ring a bell that it may be something more aggressive than a dentigerous cyst, and hence a differential diagnosis of unicystic ameloblastoma was kept, and this is what it turned out to be, a unicystic ameloblastoma, which is a variant of ameloblastoma seen in the younger age group and less aggressive than the conventional multicystic soap bubble ameloblastomas that we most often see. Odontogenic keratocyst has had its name changed over multiple editions of WHO nomenclature. The latest name to it is odontogenic keratocyst and not a keratocystic odontogenic as it was earlier known. Seen over a wide age range of patients, so age will not be able to help us diagnose this lesion, but it is a more aggressive lesion than a dentigerous cyst. You can see how it erodes multiple tooth roots, displacing teeth. It also has an impacted tooth within. And in contrast to a dentigerous cyst, which attaches at the cemento-enamel junction, most often the entire tooth is involved within the odontogenic keratocyst. This is the characteristic antero-posterior expansion seen within OKC, and not expansion along the buccolingual axis. So the characteristic axis is along the mesiolateral aspect, and the buccolingual doesn't expand as much as the antero-posterior does. Also, the margins are scalloped because of the unequal growth rate, and of course, we see signs of aggression. So this is how an OKC typically looks like. The HU values may be slightly higher because, as the name suggests, it has keratinaceous contents within. So keratin within gives you higher HU, about 40, 50, 60 HU, and there is no enhancement on this CT. Enhancement can be better seen on MR, and it may show a thin or sometimes even a slightly thicker wall to it. But an additional feature that MR helps us with is the diffusivity of the lesion. So this is on diffusion, the fluid content of the lesion shows restricted pattern. This is in contrast to an ameloblastoma. And how do we help differentiate between the two? We'll see as we go further and discuss ameloblastoma. So because of the keratinaceous content, similar to the contents that you see in an epidermoid or a colstatoma, that's the basis of why this lesion also shows restricted diffusion. And this is the typical cheesy material that can be aspirated from this lesion. When you see multiple odontogenic keratocysts in a child, think of Golden-Gall syndrome or nevoid basal cell cancer syndrome, and this is one such case with accompanying dural calcifications and rib anomalies. Ameloblastoma is now a tumor. It's not a cyst, it's a tumor, but it is a benign tumor. However, it's a locally aggressive tumor. Now, 4th edition WHO classifies ameloblastoma into 4 types. The first is the conventional ameloblastoma, the multicystic soap bubble appearance. Unicystic ameloblastoma, we have seen one type. This forms the bulk. The conventional multicystic forms the bulk of ameloblastomas, nearly 85%, and the other ones are much rarer. We have the extraosseous ameloblastoma, which is not seen in the bone but in the adjacent soft tissues, and metastasizing ameloblastoma, which metastasizes to lungs. However, on histology, it is benign, and it is this is the situation that is seen especially in recurrent ameloblastomas and not in the primary ones after being handled. So the typical location is the posterior mandible. However, we can see it repeatedly, as we see here, unilocular or multilocular lesion, but most often multisectated. And here the axis of expansion is more along the buccolingual axis than the antero-posterior axis. What we also see here is, again, features of aggression. So when you see teeth displacement, resorption, we see the inferior alveolar canal to be involved, and now we see some solid enhancing component. We know it's a tumor and not just a cyst, seen better on contrast administration. And on diffusion, sometimes when OKCs and ameloblastomas, especially the unicystic ameloblastomas, where we may or may not see a solid mural enhancing component, then this is where diffusion really helps us differentiate between an OKC and ameloblastoma. The fluid component of ameloblastoma does not show restricted diffusion. The solid component does, but the fluid component does not, unlike an OKC, which shows restricted diffusion. So apart from morphology, the antero-posterior versus buccolingual expansion in an OKC and an ameloblastoma, thin enhancing wall, solid enhancing component, diffusion is another promising tool that helps differentiate between these. And we have found an ADC of 2.1 to be a highly useful cutoff to differentiate between these two entities. Nasopalatine duct cyst. Now, this is another benign, non-aggressive, well-defined cystic lesion, usually which presents incidentally, but sometimes can present a little more aggressively when it gets superimposed infection. So well-defined lucency between the central incisors, displacing the roots of the central incisors. This is the characteristic location of the nasopalatine duct cyst in the maxilla, seen in continuity as we trace it on the other sections, in continuity with the incisive duct canal or the nasopalatine duct, as it may be called. So usually an incidental finding many a times. But what we need to remember here is that it should not be confused with a radicular cyst. So it may look as if it is in association with this apex. However, the management of the two lesions is entirely different. An NPD and a radicular cyst are managed completely differently. So we need to be sure what we are talking about, and for that, we need to trace this cyst into the nasopalatine duct. We need to see whether it is separate or continuous with the nasopalatine duct. Also here, if you see, the roots of the tooth are actually displaced kind of around the lesion rather than lying within the cyst. So this is an example of a nasopalatine duct cyst. Another lytic lesion of the jaw is a central giant cell granuloma. Now, this is most often seen in young women. It may look very similar to an ameloblastoma, this soap bubble septated appearance, enhancement. Now, this is a very solid lesion, but it can be solid cystic as well. And here is an example of a well-defined lesion, but sometimes it can be even more aggressive, giving you ill-defined margins and a lot of soft tissue extension. But what is typical of a central giant cell granuloma is the age group, the young woman. That's the demographic characteristic, and location anterior to the mandible, crossing the midline. So when you see a lesion like this in this age group, think of a central giant cell granuloma. Of course, it may be hard to differentiate between the two many a times, and we may end up giving a differential. That's all right. Another interesting feature to know about central giant cell granuloma is that it can be managed medically. Many a times it's just calcitonin injections and intralesional injections of steroids, which help us either kind of take care of the lesion entirely, or at least reduce the size of the lesion before it can be managed with more conservative surgeries. So the take-home points here from well-defined radiolucent lesions. When you look at a periapical cyst that's in association with a caries tooth or a non-vital tooth secondary to trauma, maybe you're most likely looking at a radicular cyst. A cyst in relation to the crown of a tooth is a dentigerous cyst. When you see facial cellulitis or odontogenic sinusitis in close proximity to the jaw, as you see here, think of an underlying periapical abscess causing it, and look at your bone windows and evaluate the teeth. If you see a lesion in the midline involving the nasopalatine duct, think of a nasopalatine duct cyst. An odontogenic keratocyst has a characteristic antero-posterior expansion, is a cystic lesion, has scalloped margins, has some aggressive features, and shows diffusion restriction. When you see multiple OKCs in a child, think of Golden-Gall syndrome. And when you see a more aggressive lesion, when you see a lesion with solid enhancing component, there may be soft tissue extension, think of an ameloblastoma. Moving on to ill-defined radiolucent lesions. Now here they are either malignant tumors, which could be odontogenic or non-odontogenic, or it's osteomyelitis and osteonecrosis. So here in this section, I'll just show you a couple of cases of malignant tumors. We'll discuss osteomyelitis and osteonecrosis with mixed density lesions because that is how they most often look like. So here is a very aggressive mass. Why do I say aggressive? Because there's a lot of bone destruction, there's soft tissue extension, there's extension into the orbit, so undoubtedly an aggressive mass, and it turned out to be an odontogenic carcinoma. Here is an oral squamous cell cancer invading the jaw. We see bone destruction, we see involvement of the infraalveolar canal, we see a lot of soft tissues. This is an aggressive pathology, certainly. Sarcomas are the other aggressive lesions of the jaw, which can present as ill-defined lesions with bone destruction. They could be entirely lytics or osteomyelitis, think of osteonecrosis, and sometimes the originally well-defined cystic lesions, the benign cysts, can get superinfected to give a picture like this, but that's not as common. Moving to mixed density lesions, again a list of conditions, but in the interest of time, we'll look at a couple common lesions here. This is a case of an adenomatoid odontogenic tumor. Now you can always say that no, it doesn't look. It looks like a dentigerous cyst to me, and I will give it to you because this can very well be the appearance of a odontogenic keratocyst. Although, nonetheless, the involvement of this maxillary canine. This is the typical location of an AOT. What, in addition, goes against the diagnosis of a dentigerous cyst? This punctate foci of calcification. Now here they are very subtle, so I would grant a diagnosis of dentigerous cyst also here. We would have to write that down in our differential. But this subtle foci of calcification here, which look like foci of calcification, tilt the diagnosis towards an AOT rather than a dentigerous cyst, which is also a lesion of the AOT, a lesion of the of girls in their second decade of life. That's the most common age group. This is a more typical case from the literature, and here what you see is more prominent foci of calcification. Another distinguishing feature from a dentigerous cyst would be when the tooth is impacted within it, the entire tooth is involved, the root is also involved, and the cyst does not just attach at the cemento-enamel junction. Osteomyelitis could be an ill-defined, could be a lytic lesion, could be a mixed density lesion, as we see here. There is accompanying periosteal reaction, there is accompanying soft tissue, there is sequestrum formation. But whenever you think you're looking at osteomyelitis, also remember to take a look at the underlying tooth, because odontogenic infection is the most common cause of mandibular osteomyelitis. Again,